Records Commission to order, and we'll begin with a roll call.
Ms. Kohler? Here. Mr. Shulman?
Here.
Mr. Stelzer?
Here.
Mr. Homan?
Here. And I would entertain a motion regarding the motion summary from the last meeting, which was in December. I hear a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the minutes? It's a record, it's a motion summary. It's not the minutes, it's a motion summary. The actual record is recorded. So all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Item 2, review of 2 proposed changes to the current schedule of retention and disposition for police department. Mr. Shulman, I assume this is yours.
This is mine by way of police department. Police department has a pretty active records management program, and they are always reviewing their schedules. And these are 2 records that they have that didn't have a schedule that they could identify. So these are the schedules. Obviously, if this is passed tonight, we would then incorporate that into the larger police department schedule that we've created. But rather than repeat everything we've already approved countless meetings ago, I just broke out the 2 new ones. One is an inmate admission, and then the description is a record printed from Jail Tracker, and that's a county computer program, and it's generated when a person is placed in the city's jail. So we wanted to make sure we knew how long to keep that, and we're recommending a year for that. And then NICS is a firearm evidence disposal record, and they're recommending 3 years for that. I don't know much about these particular records other than what the police department told me. But as I said, they're pretty good at keeping track of their stuff. So
Okay. So this seems like a sensible recommendation. So we're essentially we're adding these.
there's no existing schedule, so we're adding new schedules to their schedule. Yes.
Okay. Is there any discussion regarding this recommendation from the members? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion regarding the recommendation on the schedules of retention and disposition for the police department.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll do it. I'll second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're on to item 4, which is, again, is this yours, Darren?
This is mine, and I was hoping to get some insight. So as the police department was giving their request for schedules, they said, do we have a schedule, or can we create a schedule for a purchase request form? I've never done one of these forms. I didn't really recognize it, and I didn't know if the members here knew what this record was and if this fit in existing schedule, because I kind of was looking at our general schedule, and it had some financy type things, but I had never seen this form. Do you recognize this, Dean?
Yeah, it's not a form, anything that finance would do. It's something finance would encourage. It's just an internal document within the police department. It's basically the chief's way of allowing his personnel to make requests to purchase items. I'm not sure how they do it in public works, whether they just rely on the fact that let's say a street superintendent enters it into the CMI system, and then it goes from there to the director, and that's their means to say, hey, we want to buy this. This obviously goes to things that are less than $250. So again, it's a good internal control issue that the chief's aware if they use it and they follow it, basically everything that gets purchased over there, he signs off on it. So they're right. So no, it's not a finance record. It wouldn't come to us. It's an internal record. Like I said, it's a good internal control practice, and I don't even know that it would rise to the occasion that through an audit of our auditors that they would want to seek out and see that this purchase from this given whatever was actually authorized by the chief, because the chief's going to approve the purchase order because he's in that chain, that train to approve purchase order. So that would be the approval electronic. So it's only, from my standpoint, I think it's only the retention period will only be as long as administratively useful.
Thank you. It's helpful. We don't use these, so I didn't know.
Maybe you should.
Maybe I should.
You see the form, Rob?
Yeah, exactly.
We need more forms. Do another one out there.
So do we, as a commission, is this something that falls within our, you want to add this at, what's the,
What I will probably do, and we could either craft it on the spot, or if we're not in a hurry, I could write it for our next meeting, since we're going to meet again this year, is create a schedule for department purchase order records with a time period of kept as long as of administrative value, or at least until the purchase is either made or abandoned or not made. And then I can add that in our next meeting for review when it takes some time. But I think
and
that's
maybe
what
it's
we'll do.
something we need to think about. If it's not, maybe this is a practice, we should take a look at the practices in the other departments, as you were indicating.
There's ways of accomplishing that. Today's day and age, most of them are through the electronic approval process, the purchase order. But again, as we're aware, we don't require purchase orders for purchases of less than $250. So there would be a requisition. We get cited for that in our audit every year. But because of that, what about purchase of less? Kind of a departmental type of issue. How comfortable they are, how much leeway they're allowing some of their staff people to go out and make purchases.
Well, do you want to put something together then, Darren, for the next meeting?
I will, and I will also sounds like I should talk to Public Works and some of the other departments that buy a lot of things to just see what they're doing as well, to make sure it fits.
Okay,
Helpful.
so the next item is, so you'll report back on that at the next
Yes.
meeting. I mean, if you're reaching out to Public Works, you might as well reach out to the other operating departments as well, just if you want to find out.
Sounds good.
Cemetery record retention schedule, I assume that's by,
Yeah, we requested to have this put on the agenda, and we have a draft, but we don't have I want to spend some more time with our actual retention schedule. City took over operation of the cemetery in 2011. At that time, there were records that the Oak Grove Association had, some of them going way back. They really didn't throw a whole lot away. I mentioned something to Darren before the meeting that, I guess there's a legal opinion whether that's becomes a public record when we take over the cemetery operations. But regardless, we've been operating and we don't have a specific retention schedule for cemetery records. And it's can be challenging trying to identify what the records are all that are being generated. And plus, it's been a few years since I used to be heavily, spent a lot of time understanding Ohio public records laws, and there's been some subtle changes. I know talking to Darren a week or so ago, the old retention schedules, I know the ones that I had signed off on years ago, we've now got electronic versions of them in Word, which is good. And I think there has been probably some process changes, though in reading the directions that are part of the form, it does indicate that there's still a process. And as an example, I'll use the cemetery records. The form, Section A, again, you got to include the municipality, department official directly responsible for the records must sign. So a department creates or prepares a retention schedule. It has to come to the Records Commission, complete the form. Records Commission must sign the certification statement before it can be reviewed and signed at the Ohio Historical Society. So let's just assume we had a proposed cemetery retention schedule. We'd review it, make sure it meets our standards. It then would go to the Ohio Historical Society. The reviewing agent for Ohio Historical Society will indicate on your RC2 which records series will require a certificate of records disposal prior to disposal. They will sign the form and forward it to the Auditor of State's office. I didn't know the Auditor of State got involved. So, but anyways, at their level, it used to be anytime we would dispose of any record, we had to do a records disposal. We didn't have to get approval from the Records Commission, but we had to fill out the paperwork. This is somewhat of a question. If I'm reading this right, once we, like for the cemetery, create a record schedule and it goes past them, they don't see any historical significance, or let's say there's 2 items on there that they say are historically relative, and we're going to classify those as ones for which we need to submit a records disposal form.
Right. Not all of them. It used to be all of them now.
Right. For the other ones, we don't need to generate any paperwork, although I think there's still something here. I'm not whether we should or we shouldn't, but technically we don't have to submit anything to the Ohio Historical Society. Those that they do deem to have some historical significance, before we dispose of them, we got to send them the form, and they'll say, no, don't get rid of them, we want them, or whatever else. But after they do that, it goes to the state auditor. The approving agent auditor state's office will sign the form and return. I don't know what they may be looking for. Do you know?
I don't
Just
think
that,
they really do anything.
my guess is probably they inserted that in there to say that, well, if they have bank statements, and they put in a retention schedule, they're only going to keep them 2 months. Now, that's not long enough. We can't audit that. Or we want 3 years to be able to go back or whatever else on certain things. So they probably play that review, but I think that would be it. It talks about the schedule and instructions. So is there destruction? So ones that aren't specifically flagged by the Historical Society, what do we actually need to generate, at least to comply with the law? Whether we go beyond that or not, it's our own issue. Do we need to have any?
Generally not anymore. If it's the ones that they have not flagged as ones they care about, we don't have to generate anything anymore. The idea being, if they're gone, if the retention schedule says they could be gone and they're gone, that's kind of the, yeah, we're okay, get rid of them. And if it's retention schedule said 2 years and you don't have them back that far, that means you did something wrong. So I don't think you have to share anything. With that said, the police department still is kind of keeping a log and generating what they're doing because they feel safer that way, and it's not a bad practice, as you
And
said.
that's what I wanted to get into a little bit of the dialogue with the Records Commission. To me, not necessarily obligated to. I think it's probably not bad form to be able to show that we did destroy records, even if it's our own internal tracking. So that if you do that, and we create another public record, so I guess we got to do that. Record on the schedule, but does it make sense to have any consistency citywide? Because at some point, there could be an issue about our records, and did you or didn't you destroy them? If somebody, takes some conspiracy theory, say they didn't destroy them, they're using them because they can't prove anything that says they ever did destroy them or not. Who knows? If ever there's an issue, it can get all kind of crazy stuff involved with it, but does it make good operational sense to at least, I know what we did in the past, it wasn't that involved. It basically said X number of boxes of invoices from 1990, whatever,
Right.
and how detailed you put into what you're getting destroyed. But I don't know what the board's thoughts are. Do you think it makes sense, A, to keep a record, and B, to have it consistent throughout the city, i.e. we create our own form, and somebody, at least not just at a department level, maybe it gets centralized and we have something.
I've always thought it would be helpful to keep track of at least the personnel files when they're really old, but which ones we've gotten rid of and why, just because if someone comes back and asking for it and they weren't here, or they want to find a family member who might have worked here, we wouldn't have the file, but we could say, well, we did get rid of John Alger, Rob's great-great-grandfather 10 years ago, and then he was gone and we got rid of him. So I think that would be helpful in certain contexts. I don't know if we want to do it for every email or every transient record we have, but certain record series I could definitely see wanting to do a log for.
Well, I think several years ago, we started getting electronic records, and there were other things that were in there that they got really kind of hog wild on. Everything is a public record. This is a public record. Somebody handed it out at a council meeting. Now it's an airplane. And we even had, junk mail and all that sort of stuff. We had to just cover it all. We had to schedule it all. And we said, basically, you can get rid of it the minute you look at it and determine there's no value to it.
Right.
And obviously those sort of things, I don't think we would need to, but there may be a threshold above that. Anything we keep for a year or more, perhaps we ought to. I know it's the other side of it's not just complying with, obviously we want to comply with state law. The other issue is if we ever get sued, which that's not the only reason. Records, a big part of records is records management and record storage.
Yeah,
and
that's the bigger
tougher part
stuff
of
for
it.
us.
Really crack that nut. I mean, you go down to the basement, oh my gosh, time you look at it, it's a headache, and there's stuff floating all around, and sometimes it can be as important to stay on schedule and to keep it as regimented. And the challenges we have is we might come up with a concept and 2 years later, different people, and it loses its effectiveness. So I'm not a big advocate to create a lot of red tape, but perhaps being more formal will help sustain perhaps this notion of, it's not just that we have to keep it, but we have to get rid of it when it's scheduled to be getting rid of, and there's a process to do that and move everything out.
Well, this is kind of a side shoot, so I apologize and feel free to shut me down, but a lot of organizations of our size have trouble with the records program because, like us, we don't have a records manager. We have department people in each department who kind of do it, but we don't have a person whose like whole job is to oversee the whole city's records like that. You know, hey, you filled this form, I'm checking off every department's filled it in, give it to Kim. But it can be kind of a large task, and it's detail oriented, and it's also a little bit of expertise involved. And most cities of our size tend to just say, well, you're the admin in the section, so you're going to do it. And as Dean says, then they leave, and no one really tells them about the record. So
I told them about the record.
you did, well, you were higher up on that. You did the record stuff. But
Because we designated her to be someone in charge of it, now we haven't redesignated.
Yeah.
so as we grow, or as we hire, if we ever hire more admin staff, it might be worth considering. That could be either a paralegal or just allow someone
Right.
coming in who does the records, and they're not just Dean's records persons or Darren's records person. They're the person who goes to all the aides. Say,
It needs to be citywide.
yeah,
Well, that's why I think in the office, either council clerk position or the executive secretary, like, we're a combination because really they're in charge of a lot of the records that get generated through the public meetings that we have, through the requests that come in. So it's just coming up with what we think the system is going to be to make that work. And it is a little different than just the records retention piece.
I mean, it's just to give you an anecdote as to the challenge of it. Every year I do the shred day, which is on electronic records, but I organize that and I send it out to my contacts in all the department. And invariably that email gets bounced back because I forgot that 2 people retired, and then no one knows who the new person is doing it. And this year we had John Hunter retired, and he did all the tax stuff, and he brought a lot of institutional knowledge with him. And we didn't realize that there was a Rob group of tax records, or Rob group of records, and a Lori Johnson group of records. And so I miscommunicated because I didn't realize that John used to just do both. So it's just hard to keep up with everybody's moving around, retirements and things.
I think, and obviously Darren got involved and understands. I mean, I remember years ago, I did all that, all the training, Ohio Historical Society, had all the issues, and sometimes that's changed over time. But I think day in, day out, I think it, I know Michelle got involved in that more heavily. We hired a consultant guy from up in Marion, the former police captain.
Robert.
What was his
Bob
name?
Schultz.
Bob Schultz, who came in. We pushed the envelope a little bit. Sometimes organizationally, we just need to do that, and we need to stay on top of it. And nothing against Darren, not that he can't keep track of it, but I think it probably would be beneficial. Now, within my department, I got Kathy King, our new office supervisor in income tax. She's been here 7.5 months. But this whole notion comes from private sector, worked at Delaware County Bank for a number of years. This records, public records, disclosing public records, to me, I think it's something I just have to keep telling myself too, because you don't think about it. Probably need to get her to some training. It's not just what we schedule, but what is a public record? We offer that sometimes generically at a city level to all of our employees, because we're all subject to record disclosure when people make records requests. But getting it to the point where we know we can organize our records even as we're generating them, and to get it to such a point that it can be destroyed. As to Darren before the meeting, things are starting to get a lot grayer because things that are electronic have multiple, we might get electronic payments of certain things that show up on a electronic bank statement that we don't even get a bank statement anymore. It's electronically in the system of the bank. And other than some banks will say, just like with your personal accounts, we're going to keep your statement information for 12 months, but after that, it ain't there no more. And that whole notion of just staying on top of saying what does that mean if our bank's destroying our bank statements electronically because we don't need it printed out anymore, we just look at it, but our retention schedule says we got to keep them 3 years and audited. We're in a glitch. But again, I need to engage people to know that but it can be helpful to have a person that's
Well, I
behind the
think,
scenes,
right.
scheduling the retention or the destruction, knowing, keeping track of who's in and out, and being a little bit more from up front. Again, not that you can or couldn't, but
Well, I think it's probably I don't know, as they say, the role of our office, the executive office, whether that's something we have to talk about. But
did you raise your hand, Lane, for, is that,
Question.
oh, I thought you were volunteering.
I'm willing to help whatever.
But records can, I mean, it can take 8 hours a day. There's a lot of records here.
Right.
I mean,
I'm willing to have an assistant.
Well, and that may be the case, but it, again, it is. And I think we kind of take a low-key approach. Counties and some of those statutory entities are pretty specific about it. I sometimes see it, and it's like, whoa, we don't go to that level. Even like things I see coming in from the county and with George Kaitza, and how their certifications all work, we kind of, there's some exposure. And I guess if we ever get sued and somehow we have to pay out big bucks because we didn't do something right, then we'll step back and say, well, maybe we should put more of an effort into it. You're always subject to getting sued, but to be honest, they're almost 28 years, and I don't recall that we've had any issues. But it is.
Well, it doesn't mean we shouldn't have an organized system in place to
Well, and the other advantage, obviously, there's the reducing risk standpoint, but then, even since probably, Michelle, how long have you been retired now? 2 years? So even since she's been on, we've generated thousands and thousands and thousands of records just because it's so easy, and the ability to be able to access them and find them is something that, Michelle organized what we had going back. But as new records created, we have to make sure we name them and follow them and have the ability to get at them. Otherwise, we're not going to get sued, but we can't find anything, and we can find that stuff. But
Is there anything regarding the cemetery that needs action now, Dean?
No,
You just use this as
I was hoping when I had Michelle put it on the agenda, what was it, 6 weeks ago, when we had to get that to you? No. Ask Elaine.
Elaine,
I know, I'm just.
What'd I say?
looking at it.
you said Michelle.
Did I?
Michelle. That's why I was just looking like, I'm sorry, what was that, 6 weeks ago?
No, I was just kidding about getting it on. I put it on the agenda because I told Elaine that I was hoping to have
Right,
something that
and
we could
that's-
adopt, because we're
that's
kind of in
good.
this, we don't have a retention schedule, so we haven't gotten rid of anything, but we do need to get rid of some things, and we do need to get that something in place for the cemetery, and then at some point we'll continue to update it. That doesn't necessarily need any action today.
okay.
Did one other comment. Now, we had some discussion at a previous records committee meeting about even what role, if any, IT may play. And I know Rachel, I don't know if she was at the meeting, but she had mentioned at some point in time, they're talking about records management systems and working with a number of others. I think also, not just from the standpoint of the hassle of records retention and records commission and whatever else, destruction, just manage our information, being able to get access to it is important. Darren mentioned about, sometimes it depends. Just because somebody knew where they put things electronically, it's not always that easy to get others to do that. And so it's not just a matter of being able to produce records or retain them. Just to get access to information so we know what we've done or not done can be important.
Yeah.
And again, anything takes time, but I strongly feel that we need to get somebody at an IT level very much knowledgeable about this,
Mm-hmm.
and not just to say, oh yeah, well, we got to keep emails, so they store emails for the last 100 years. At some point there needs to be a strategy. I think IT can come up and help align that and work on that too.
Well, you mentioned a strategy. That's probably really the overall goal, is to have a better strategy for the management of our documents and our records. Some of it, obviously, it's pursuant to state code, but it's also just what do we want to do? What's the best way to do it internally so that it's systematic and it's uniform across all departments. And that is
Well, you
something we're gonna have to deal with.
Somewhat deal with it sooner or later. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think with the IT CIP submissions
Yeah.
is 67, I don't know what it is, I don't remember the number, but big bucks for a records management software. I think it's
Because
for
they were
the Public Works
looking-
one for scanning
Yeah.
plans and all that stuff they've been talking about, but
they're
Yeah.
pricey.
What?
Expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
but again, there needs to be,
Okay.
I think, something a little bit more comprehensive.
Well, we'll need to follow up. I mean, we will as staff members. And Michelle, we're not gonna, there's no expectation that you,
See you
so
tomorrow.
you're retired, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I'll see you
Um,
tomorrow. Talk about it.
So, well, is there anything else, any other member comments? I mean,
I just want to point out one thing that Tina touched on. If you don't have a schedule for something, just treat it like the record's permanent. So in terms of the cemetery, we'll just keep them until there is a schedule, and we'll be perfectly compliant, but we just can't get rid of anything until we have a schedule. So no rush, but we'll probably, do you think we'll be ready to have it for our next meeting near the end of the year?
okay.
That'll be a fun one.
Okay, is there any other business, any other member comments? Our next meeting will be scheduled for,
Well, we were talking, Dean and I were talking possibly October after CIP's been submitted and before budget season, if you think.
I think we should do it before like December,
okay.
talking the end of the year, but then it gets busy the end of the year, people are off, so I'd shoot more for October.
Yeah, after October 15th, but
Yeah.
before November 1st.
Is that too close to when the budget needs to be submitted? for
No,
November?
I think if it's towards sometime in October, October 15th is the date by which council has to adopt the CIP, so
Right, but the budget's due.
November 1st.
So
So it could be,
maybe after, like the first week of November, after the budget's submitted? Would that be-
well, I don't
That would
know.
work okay, I think, the
Yeah.
first week.
Yeah, that would be all right.
I think last year, the last one was December 13th, and then it, gets in.
We were crunching it.
Yeah.
Is
So
what
some-
we were trying to do.
yeah.
So
Early November.
I think that, okay.
All right. Well, with that, there are no other comments, then we stand adjourned. You don't have it.
This has got writing on it.